Good morning, everyone. Is somebody's microphone on? This is the meeting of the Gwent Police and Crime Panel held at Penalta House on Friday the 24th of September 2021. In terms of the meeting today, we could have firstly taken an item on co-opted members' appointment before we go to... Try your headphones. No. I'll ask something. So before we go to the item on the co-opted members, can I just take any declarations of interest? Let me just state, click on your mic and just state your declaration.
Declaration of interest that I'm the chair of the Greek
and you're a co-opted member, so that's why you... Okay, thank you, Peter. You can just leave the chamber and we'll take the item. First item on the agenda is the appointment to the Gwent Police and Crime Panel co-opted members. As members will recall, we do appoint co-opted members co-terminus for the appointments of the Gwent Police and Crime Commissioner. In the summer, we appointed a subcommittee to do the appointment, and the appointment process is set out in the report at point 4. The interview panel, Councillor Colin Mann, Tony Eason and Jason Jordan and myself interviewed the applicants. The 2 applicants that we received were the existing co-opted members. Therefore, following the interview, the recommendation is set out at 7.1 that Mr Peter Nuttall and Mrs Gillian Howells are reappointed as co-opted members and to be run until 31st of October 2024, subject to Home Office approval. If members have any questions?
I propose the recommendation.
Will somebody second that?
Second.
Can I take a vote, please? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Therefore, they will be reappointed subject to Home Office approval. I'll now re-invite Councillor Mr Nuttall to re-enter the room. The next item on the agenda is to appoint the Chair and the Vice Chair for the ensuing year. Do I have a nomination for Chair and Vice Chair, please? All right, sorry. Do we have a nomination from...
I move re-election of the
Chair
Chair.
for who? And that's for Gillian Howells and Councillor Colin Mann. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Can I take a vote on that, please? Thank you. That's a majority. In view of the absence of the Chair, Mrs Gillian Howells, she's given apologies. Can I invite Councillor Colin Mann to take the Chair, please?
I'll try again. My usual trick, I was muted when I was talking. Say thank you for your confidence. I hope to fulfill that confidence as the year goes on. As has already been mentioned, Mrs Jill Howells, who should be chairing the meeting, unfortunately is a COVID contact with her daughter and is unable to be with us in person, but I'm sure she is watching over us online. Making sure that we get things right. We are meeting here on a face-to-face basis as the Police and Crime Panel comes under the Home Office regulations rather than the Welsh Government regulations. So we don't have the option of either hybrid or online meetings, as some people have said, due to the decisions of various Whitehall mandarins, but that's where we are. Some people prefer this, of course, and some people don't. I also understand that we don't have the Police and Crime Commissioner, Mr. Jeff Cuthbert, with us due to health problems, but he has a very able deputy, Larry Thomas, who I'm sure will adequately cope with anything that she's asked. The function of the panel, of course, is to both question and support the PCC, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the deputy in the carrying out of their duties, and it is their job, of course, to hold the Chief Constable to account. Having said that, did you want to bring anything in, Kath?
Just go to the declarations of interest.
Oh yeah. So we've had declarations of interest once, but we do need to do it again. So could I ask for declarations of interest, please? Peter, the same as before? Okay. Anyone else? No. Okay, so the apologies for absence. I just mentioned Mrs. Jill Howells. Christine Forehead? Or?
Yeah, we have apologies from Councillor Jess Kirby, Christine Forehead, and Peter Clark. We also have apologies from, as you said, the Commissioner and Darwin Pask.
Okay, thanks, Kath.
Chair, apologies, Lisa Winnett.
Oh yes, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I did see that one, and I forgot. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Clive. Okay, so the next item is repimp, item 5, to approve the minutes of the Police and Crime Panel held on the 5th of March. I'll just call through. It's page 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Could somebody propose that is a correct record? Thanks, Peter. And the seconder? Yeah. Oh, thank you, Jason. And the next one is the panel on. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Going too quickly. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. The next one is item 6, the minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of July, page 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Again, could someone propose that is the correct record?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason.
I think there was a typo on it yesterday.
Oh yes, there was a typo. Yeah.
Councillor Jenkins and James.
Yeah, 71 typographical correction. Seconder, please. Okay, thanks, Peter. And all those in favour? Okay, thanks, everyone. The next item.
We move into that first.
Oh yes, sorry. We have actually we don't want to be accused of wasting police time, so we are going to have the presentation on cybercrime, which is item 9, and we'll go back to deal with 7 and 8 afterwards.
After 10.
So we're having the 2 presentations, 9 and 10, before we then go back to 7. Over to you, folks.
Thank you.
Is it Nicola? First one?
Yes. Just trying to load up my PowerPoint for you. Okay. So good morning, everyone. This is a presentation on cybercrime, economic crime and digital policing. You may think that it is 3 separate issues, but as I go through the presentation, it will become quite clear that this is actually huge overlap in crime or when police and community. And we can't do one without the other, and it'll become quite clear now when I go through the presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the only way I got my surface going now, so I can hear the room. I'll turn my volume.
Okay. So can everyone see the presentation on there? Yep. Okay. So this covers this. I won't go through the first slide, but this is an extract from HMIC Real Lives Crime Study of Digital Crimes and Policing. This sort of gives an overview of how technology affects communities and how they're policed. Cybercrime is not just, as it says on the tin, committed through a computer. It can be right across all technologies now. Mobile phones, everybody's got mobile phones, cyber computers, etc. And no more so than within the past 18 months, when we've been in the COVID crisis, has these cybercrime offences been more prevalent. So what do they all mean? So when we talk about cybercrime, economic crime, and digital policing, it's very difficult to understand how they overlap. But what I will say is majority of crimes that can be committed by criminals, as you and I know, can be committed online or through a cyber venue. So it is very, very overlaps exactly on those. So we've got two sort of types of crime. We've got cyber-dependent crime, which is the disruption, the malware, the denial of service, which affects organizations right from huge multi-million international companies right down to small companies. Are they not? Slide. Right, so is it me? Yeah. Yeah, I should be okay now. I think I probably hold on. Okay. So where are we now? So okay. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so the two different sort of types. Oh, sorry. Shall I carry on? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we've got the two types. We've got cyber-enabled and cyber-dependent. As I said, now the cyber-dependent is the disruption, the malware, the ransomware. Yeah. Right, okay, so how do you want me to play this? Sure. Yeah. Very apt for a cybercrime presentation. That's okay. are coming through. I'd have brushed up on that this morning if I'd known. Yeah, yeah, it is, yeah. Good job.
We do need it to be broadcast as well. I think, okay, so we'll see if we get through expected.
Okay, no problem.
We can do you.
Okay. No, yeah, exactly. No, that's okay. Yeah, okay. So I'll go back. So we got sort of two areas. There's cyber-dependent crime, and that is the denial of service, malware, disruption. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So cyber dependent, as I said, that's ransomware, malware, and the denial of service. So that hits organisations from multi-international ones to your smaller companies as well. And then we've got cyber enabled. Now this is the most prevalent crime that we've got, because not only can cyber enabled crimes be committed online, they can be committed as you and I know as the traditional crimes as well. So we've got stalking, grooming, harassment, bullying, and that has gone on the rise hugely. You will see with the younger generation, and I'm able to say that because I am older, that they will use social media, Facebook, etc. now to do bullying rather than face-to-face bullying, which is quite concerning. Okay, so how do we deal with this in Gwent then? So we've got economic crime, we've got fraud, one of the biggest areas of reported crime across the country, fraud. We've had, and I put for those of you who can see the slides, I put in there that £137 billion a year is lost through money laundering, through crime, through reported crime. Across the country, so it's huge, and it's a third of all. It carries out a third of all crime that's reported, and it's increased by 40% over a 4-year period. Money laundering is another way that our organised crime groups, our real experienced financial criminals use as a way to outlet their criminal gains. They will set up a business that looks quite kosher, and there's got an outlet for that money, and that money that they are gaining through criminal gains goes through that facade, should we say, on the front. So what is happening in Gwent with cyber dependent? Well, as you can see there, cybercrime reports in Wales, we've got the levels there, and they may not mean much to yourselves, but what you will see is the highest there is South Wales Police, and you would expect that because they are the biggest force. And then we've got Dyfed Powys, Gwent at sort of the same level, similar size forces, and North Wales a little bit higher. What you will notice there, though, is the losses, the financial losses are highest in one of the lowest reported. So that is Dyfed Powys, show a 33%, 33,300 loss. That's 33,000, sorry, loss there. Now that it doesn't compare, but what that means is even though less companies were hit, the impact on those companies was huge. So it means that, you know, there's a huge impact on companies there. South Wales Police are showing a 659, yet only a £4,400 losses were sustained there. So, and then we've got the 5 top reported crimes there: hacking, social media, and email. That's the top one there. Computer virus and malware. Hacking on personal accounts, hacking and extortion, and you will see that hacking of servers, thankfully, is relatively low. So the picture in Gwent of cyber-enabled crime, sorry, and you will see then, as I've just said, that bullying and harassment takes 71% of all crimes that are reported to us. It's very, very difficult for us to measure cybercrime as a standalone offence, because, as I said, you know, the offences that can be committed on online are the ones that can be committed face-to-face as well. So the substantive crime, for instance, stalking, would be recorded. It's very, very difficult to get a picture of how the values of cybercrime at the moment. It's a national issue. It is being looked at, but we are very, very conscious in Gwent, you know, that we are recording these crimes and picking up on where they are cyber-enabled. Exploitation is the next sort of area that's high, and that can be sexual exploitation, exploitation financially, etc. And then we've got deception and fraud, which is on those top 5 as well. So moving on, trying to move these as well as use the old paper. So what is happening within Gwent with online child abuse? Sadly, this is on the rise. Nationally, it's gone through the roof over the past 2 years. It is something that we are really, really focused on within Gwent Police. You will see there's an increase of 343% of cases being dealt with between 2019 and 2020. This is sadly where the most vulnerable of individuals are targeted, and illegal images of children, etc. And those are dealt with within one of our departments, which I'll go on to describe there. But sadly, that is an area that is increasing constantly. So, just try and get this to move on. There we go. So how is Gwent responding to cybercrime and economic crime and protecting the public? Because we're all Gwent, you know, individuals here. So the PCC's police and crime plan has identified the cyber and economic crime, and particularly fraud, are priorities, and rightly so. Our Chief Constable, Pam Kelly, is the National Cyber Lead. So we've got a good sponsor there with, you know, with the work that she's doing there. But as we all know, this area is too big for one team to deal with itself. It stretches across all the vulnerabilities. It stretches across all of our departments within the force, and it encompasses old offences, like I've explained to you. New and criminals are always on the front foot, so we need to be that one step just behind them, looking at how those complex and different crimes are emerging as well. So we, as a force, have adopted a whole force approach. We've got specialist training for all our, sort of complex crimes and incidents, and we work very, very closely with the National Crime Agency, the regional units, because we cannot do this alone. Many of the crimes that are committed on, in relation to cyber, many of them come from abroad as well. So we need that those international links as well, with the knowledge that those other specialist teams have. But within Gwent, we use this as a whole system approach, a whole force approach. So one of the areas that we deal with the sort of the higher end and the more complex crimes, our cybercrime unit, and our POLIT, police online investigation teams, who deal with the child abuse images, etc., in those cases that I've just explained. So we work in accordance with the 4 Ps. This is a national framework: prepare, prevent, protect, and pursue. So prepare, we prepare our staff for dealing with our response to these cyber crimes. Our training all of our resources, our new recruits that come in. It is a crucial part of the training that they have to pick up, going through, because the cybercrime criminals are the rise in this is for all to see. The prevent. So children and young people are particularly vulnerable to, susceptible to being a victim or being involved in cybercrime with the social media use. We've got all the Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all, everybody will know somebody that uses that at the moment. So we work with our partnership with Tarian on this one, with one of our partners down in the Rockview in the Regional Organised Crime Unit and the National Crime Agency. So we work very, very closely with preventing our young children and young people getting into this sort of area of crime. Protect. We provide help and advice, guidance to a community, stop them becoming victims of cybercrime. We've got a Protect PCSO specifically. She was very, very useful during the initial lockdown. We had online safeguarding, and the uptake on that was unbelievable. The advice and safeguarding that she was able to give through that early time of lockdown, when people were really vulnerable to being a victim of cybercrime, it really came through there. And then we've got Pursue. So prosecuting and disrupting those engaged in cybercrimes is a huge part of our work. And then we've got the police online investigation team, and these we sort of go target the offenders who use the internet to sexually exploit children and are most vulnerable, and the safeguarding there is absolutely crucial. So with our prepare, so we've steadily recruited new officers, and we are still recruiting new officers. The benefit for us is the newer probationers that are coming in are very, very savvy on computer. They are up with the technology, and that is a real bonus for us, because the training that we give those, they are really switched on to identifying cyber offences as well. So if I just move on here, not having it. Okay. So that we've got public engagement there. As I've said, that those are some, just an image of our cyber CSO and our Protect officer. The majority of the work they were able to do was online in the early days, which was crucial. But however, they're starting to go back out now that the world is starting to open back out, and do engagement with yourselves, with organisations, so that we are able to do those interactions, rather than a virtual interaction, but face to face. I think it is a better way of getting these messages and safeguardings across. We've got safeguarding hubs now within every local authority. So our online teams work very, very closely with the safeguarding areas within those hubs as well, not only for the physical contact, but the cyber element as well. So since August, well, in August alone, they led or supported 9 events across Gwent, engaging directly with more than 1,600 people, addressing concerns and providing practical advice. So that just gives you an idea of, you know, now that we're back up and running, how efficient and effective those 2 areas are. We've got a review ongoing with our cybercrime team as well, looking to, because we are very conscious that those areas are on the rise, so we're looking to increase the teams as well, the staff we've got in there. So police online investigation teams, as I've said, these look at the most horrific sort of areas of this online crimes against our most vulnerable, indecent images of children. And unfortunately, this is on the rise, not just within the Gwent area, but nationally and internationally. We work very closely with the NCA, the Child Exploitation Online Protection, which is the team that they run. So they task nationally, internationally, and look at all the platforms that are being used by our offenders in this area, and then disseminate all the packages out to local forces for those to deal with the safeguarding and the enforcement, making sure our vulnerable children are looked after there. So those are the Polit team there. So going on to the financial investigation unit, another overlap within our cybercrime world and all the offences that we deal with there. So within the financial investigation unit, we have a fraud triage, we have safeguarding, the dealing with serious and complex crime, and the proceeds of crime investigation team. So how do we identify fraud within Gwent? Well, we get members of the public ringing in, we get reports to ourselves from members of the public, and we also take a considerable amount of referrals from Action Fraud. Those come through on a national basis, and we are able to triage those and then deal with those individuals that are within the Gwent area that have been subject to financial fraud, or you know, so we need to do the safeguarding then. And we also deal closely with the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau, and then we go out and deal with those as offences as well. We've got forced training days across our officers. We do cyber training, and recently we've taken on some police staff investigators who have brought with them a wealth of experience. Some have worked previously in the banking area, so they're able to bring those sort of skills with them to give us that additional expertise as well. And just give you an example of in 2020 we had 2,531 reported frauds, but our detection rate for Gwent was 22%. Given that the national average is 5.6%, I think, you know, that is a real tribute to the hard work and how we identify fraud offences and you know, protecting the most vulnerable there. Within the just to go on to this so you can see. So within the financial investigation unit, we have safeguarding officer. We look at the victims list, and we also deal with suspicious activity reports. Now, our safeguarding officer deals with the most vulnerable. So we've got the most vulnerable we deal with are absolutely anyone over 75 that's been targeted or is a victim of financial crime. Every victim of romance fraud will be contacted and dealt with individually by our safeguarding officer, and then all repeat victims over 70. That doesn't narrow it down to just those individuals for safeguarding. Anyone that needs advice from our safeguarding officer will be contacted individually and advice provided there. So that is a real good Operation Signature is our sort of overarching operation, but we look at all those vulnerable individuals as well. We're also signed up to the banking protocol, and some of you may know that that is where branch staff have been trained to be alerted to, you know, any suspicious individuals that come in or suspected scams, and they can alert police directly. So banks and building societies are signed up to that, as well as Gwent Police. And it's just, I just got to put some results on there of, you know, how much we've recovered on there, and the amounts of financial recovery are huge. We've had some excellent results within the Gwent area, and we do a victim satisfaction survey just to check on, you know, are we getting it right? Is there anything else the public want in relation to our approach to financial crime? Because people lose their life savings. You know, we're not talking about small amounts of money. People lose what they've saved all their life for. So, you know, interacting with victims is a huge part of the work we do within financial crime. And then we work also with the National Economic Crime Victim Unit. This is led by the City of London Police, and they coordinate and task a UK response to economic crime effectively. So any new areas of you know, criminality that are coming through, that's filtered right out to all the police forces, and then we link in with the they link in with the National Crime Agency, the Crown Prosecution Service, the Financial Conduct Authority, HMRC, and the Home Office as well. So, you know, this is a huge area of our work within Gwent. But we don't just deal with these as a standalone within the financial crime unit. All our officers within Gwent have a training on financial crime, how to identify, how to look after those vulnerable victims as well, and how to link this in with our cybercrime approach across Gwent as well. I've just, as the last slide, I've just put I'm conscious I've talked for quite a long time, but I've just put you know, the details of what proceeds of crime, our performance for Gwent, and as you can see, those are quite impressive amounts of money that we've recovered, and a lot of that comes back into us. 50% of that comes back into us, and it's used then for through the PCC's office for, you know, projects across the community. So where we are hitting the criminals in the pockets, we are recovering a lot of that financial you know, money that has been taken and giving it back out to our community. So that is it really from me. It is a whistle-stop tour. It's a huge area for us within Gwent, and ever on the increase, especially now that criminals are getting a bit more astute to using, and you will know yourselves, the criminals really switched on to when the pandemic was on. They were on the PPE, selling those across the internet as well. They were on that straight away within weeks of the pandemic hitting. So you can see how astute the criminals get within this area of criminality and policing. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And to give you your proper title, which I did in the first place, Chief Superintendent Nicola Brain. Okay, that's for the record anyway. I mean, when you see that, and so will the slides be available after the meeting?
Yes,
okay. Good. Conscious of the fact that we've had to switch off from outside. Yeah, it's easy to understand when you hear this why so much resource is not actually walking the streets, because obviously, certainly as councillors, we get the comment more often than not about, well, you've got all these extra coppers. I haven't seen any of them. You know, well, obviously they are engaged in that, and I think the fact that Gwent was detecting 22% against, I assume is the Wales and England average, is it, of 5%? That is impressive by anyone's standards, I think. Shame it's not 100%, but it never will be, will it? Okay, I think we've got a few minutes for questions, everyone. Anyone at all? I have one from the chair, who, as we know, is not with us. I'll start off with that one anyways, from Mrs. Jill Howells. The panel have been regularly advised that the data does not exist to provide any supporting evidence of the figure of around 40% of all crime being attributed to cybercrime. It is interesting to see in this report the information provided. How has this data been able to be compiled, and how reliable is it, please? Here's a nice easy one for you.
As I said, it is very difficult to capture cybercrime alone, because it overlaps on all areas of crime within not just Gwent, but with police forces. It is a national issue how we record accurate figures for cybercrime itself. We are working towards getting a consistent recording of cybercrime across the country. I know this doesn't, I'm giving you a bit of a politician's answer yet at the moment, but it is really, really difficult, because very often when we record a crime, for instance, I said bullying and harassment, that will be crimed as the substantive crime of bullying, and then cybercrime is just the conduit of how that crime has been committed. So it is quite difficult to separate those two and record it as a actual cybercrime. I don't know if that answers your question. There's a lot of work nationally going on with the national crime recording to find out how we can extract the different percentages of cybercrime as opposed to the substantive crime. Yeah, we are improving all the time on how we extract that data, but it is extremely difficult at the moment to just get that absolute picture of cybercrime levels.
Digital money, Bitcoin, does that, you get involved in that sort of thing? They hiding. Yeah, okay. Auntie. Good idea. Sorry about that. This technology got me mixed up this morning. The question is about cybercrime on BitMoney, for example. What is the responses within Gwent? Is it big, or is it an effective problem?
It is an increased use of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Criminals are again using that as a of payment, which sometimes avoids the money laundering side of the house that I've said. So there's no actual physical cash. We have got some real experts within the crime team that are able to deal with the cryptocurrency area. And previously it wasn't regulated, which caused a lot of concerns across the country, but it's now been regulated. So anyone that's using cryptocurrency, it makes it a little bit more difficult for them now to use this for money laundering as well. So yes, it is on our radar. We are dealing with it, and it is on the rise as our criminals start using that sort of currency rather than hard cash.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on slide 8 under the online child abuse, it's mentioned there 343% increase. That's alarming to me. So what numbers are we talking about, actually?
Well, this fluctuates on a daily basis, but we get, it all depends on the packages that come through from the National Crime Agency. Most of our referrals come from National Crime Agency, so we run on probably a daily figure of using 40 packages within the department. We deal with high risk ones immediately. Those are dealt with immediately. So by high risk, I mean that there is concerns that the individual that is the offender has got access to children, or there's some concerns that they're in a profession which gives them access to children. Those are dealt with immediately. There's a medium risk then where we will do intelligence on those, and the ultimate will be the safeguarding of the child always. That is, so basically we are running on about 48 packages, we're looking at per week. but very, very few of those will be high risk. They are dealt with immediately. There's no question about that.
Thank you.
Okay, Clive. Deputy PCC, Lenny. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't. I've just noticed your hand up, Jason. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Can I say Jason Jordan?
Yeah, on the slide 7, you've got on the cyber-enabled crime where it's got other. Could you tell us what the other is, please? And also, is that my mic is on?
No, the,
on that one as well, is it?
if you lift this button.
I got it. Sorry. See, no, I'm not technology-minded either. On the slide number 7, it's got the enabled crime. Can you explain what the other is, please? And also, is that a 215% increase on that?
Okay, so there we go. So we've got bullying, harassment, exploitation and fraud. Other could mean, to be honest, there's a range of offences that this could be, and they are low. There is a 215%, but if you look, the numbers are quite low. So this could mean where, I'm trying to think of an example. Is probably the hacking of a Facebook account, which is a bit lower, that it doesn't come up in those high areas. I can probably get back to you on what they are. At the moment, I couldn't give you the exact examples of what they are, and I'd be wrong if I said that, given you an offence on there. But those numbers are quite low, albeit they are in the top, the top 5 reported ones. So I would have to get back to you on that one and to give you a specific crime of what they are.
Perhaps we can feed that into the minutes when, yeah, it's okay. Okay, Deputy PCC, Larry.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just thank Detective Chief Superintendent Brain for a really informative presentation. And I know that cyber has been a particular focus and interest of the panel for many years, and I think that challenge of understanding the data and understanding how crime is recorded when we know that so much crime is cyber dependent, cyber enabled, but not necessarily crime to cyber. And I think that is an ongoing national issue, as Nikki has spoken to us today. But I just wanted to on behalf of the Commissioner, just to provide the panel with some assurance of the work that Gwent Police undertakes in this area. And I've had the privilege, one of the privileges of being the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner is you get to see the work firsthand. And I've been to the City of London with officers from Gwent Police and seen the work of both the City of London and Action Fraud in operation. And you might think, well, so how does that help us here in Gwent? But the City of London are the lead force for all of the forces across England and Wales who take forward that coordinating role with Action Fraud and who liaise with individual forces and liaise with Gwent Police on a daily basis to make sure that we are responding to fraud and economic crime. And it is absolutely sobering to sit and watch the screens in London, in the City of London force control room, of the amount of economic crime that we are monitoring on a daily basis. And that is replicated here in Gwent. And, you know, if you go to our offices, where our economic crime unit are stationed, you would think that CSI Miami or CSI New York is alive and well and is here in Cwmbran. And sometimes we don't show the public that. And I think that's what we want to bring to life here today. And the other sobering opportunity I've had, and it is an opportunity, but it is stark, is equally sitting next to our Polit team and watching live screen time the numbers of indecent images of children that are being monitored on the web by our officers, again, in our very skilled and dedicated workforce here sitting behind computer screens, but actually dealing with the real reality that cyber is impacting on members of our community day in, day out. As you say, Chair, this is the hidden crime, this is the hidden vulnerability, and it's the work that I'm very proud to be able to report to you. I would just also then want to reiterate the work of our prevention officer and our police community support officer in our cyber team, and they provide absolutely first-class prevention, advice and support. And I would ask all of you to invite our CSO and our prevention officer to come and talk to your community groups, to come and talk to your councils, because they really do provide excellent advice in the most interactive and engaging way. So I'm sure they would welcome an invitation from any of your organisations to come and speak to them. And finally, you know, the amount of money that is generated through being able to enforce these areas of crime, that then the Police and Crime Commissioner is able to use for us to be able to fund community groups. The PCC fund is open currently, and we are looking forward to investing that money back in our communities, supporting our community organisations and young people, and working really constructively to try and protect and prevent further crime. So it really does demonstrate how we work through our cyber work to support our communities, to prevent further crime, and to build the resilience of our communities.
Okay, thanks a lot, Lady Dagmar. I think what you said towards the end is particularly important, and the one satisfying part of this is when you said that a lot of the money recovered is reinvested into our communities, and if we don't get anything else out of it, at least some of the communities can actually benefit. I'm sure if we had details of the people to contact to give these presentations to community groups, that would be, I'm sure some of our members will take that up.
We will forward those to you. Also, just to let you know that we've already had 18 bids in so far for the Police and Community Fund, so we're looking forward to receiving more bids from community, and those are communities across all 5 local authority areas of Gwent.
Thanks, Lady. I don't have any other indications, and time, of course, is as usual is pressing on. So could I say thanks again for a very useful presentation. I know that the chair is particularly frustrated that she can be here to listen to this firsthand, because it's something, as was mentioned, that it's something that has been a topic in the panel for, well, on many occasions. So we do appreciate your time in coming and doing the presentation. Okay, thanks, Nicola. Thanks, Nicola. Okay, so if we can, our next item is the presentation by Chief Superintendent Mike Richards on stop and search.
Well, I'm firstly very pleased that Nikki went first and was able to iron out the IT issues.
There should be, there's a PowerPoint on the top, isn't there, Tony? Sorry, man. Kath will rescue you now. So if you can carry on, Mike, and then we'll...
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, Deputy Commissioner, can I just check with you that the slides are moving on? Are you on overview? Okay, the technology is working.
Yeah, the slides are with us.
Okay,
thanks.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here in person and online. My name is Mike Richards. I'm the superintendent in the east of the force. So my day job is responsible for policing in Newport and Monmouthshire. On top of my day job, I am the force portfolio lead for stop and search and use of force. And I am one of 3 gold commanders who are responsible for policing protest and public disorders. So only one of 3 in the force. Today, I've been asked to speak to you about those subjects. So My proposal, knowing that we are restricted with time, is to spend 10 minutes talking about stop and search and use of force. And I will cover maybe the public perceptions, what stop and search and use of force are, the story in Gwent Police, and how we monitor and scrutinise those really important and contentious powers. Then I'll spend the next 10 minutes talking about policing protest and disorder, what the current landscape looks like in terms of BLM, anti-government, animal rights, environmental protests. I will go through with you some of the key legislation that I have to consider as a commander of those events. And I'll finish off how we police them, the skills of our officers, and I hope, Chair, that we'll have some time at the end for some questions. The next 4 slides are images, and I hope they're coming across on your screens because a picture is worth 1,000 words. This screen, for me, these images show the public feeling, the strength of feeling that there is around these contentious powers. And of course, they need no introduction. The image on the top left of your screen is George Floyd, who was killed May last year. And the public outcry, rightly, in terms of what we saw with the BLM movement and protest activity right throughout England and Wales. It's not a force in England and Wales that didn't see a Black Lives Matter protest following that awful tragedy. The image below, the Guardian image, is a former professional footballer, Dalian Atkinson, who died following police contact in the West Mercia police area. You know, it is hard, isn't it, to build trust within policing when we see these high-profile episodes happening, not just across the water, but in England and Wales too. The 2 other images, the top one is Bianca Williams, a great British athlete who was stopped and searched in London with her partner and accuses police of racial profiling. And of course, the image below is the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, who is publicly apologising for the police approach to how they used stop and search. The next images are interesting. The Daily Mail is an older image where there is a call from senior politicians to use more stop and search. Beat gang violence with more stop and search is the headline. The headline next to it is police do target black people on the streets. And the article is saying that we use stop and search too frequently. Is it any wonder why our officers are sometimes confused about these very, very contentious powers? The next slides show again the strength of feeling for stop and search. End racist stop and search now. End stop and search. Scrap section 60. Section 60 is a power, stop and search power. Ban the taser. Some people are calling for. And then the last slides that I want to just share with you, a former Met top cop saying that stop and search is traumatizing. And of course, similar protests around this important and contentious power. So we've talked a little bit about the strength of feeling, the public perceptions. What actually do we mean by stop and search? Well, it's a power to detain a person who is not under arrest in order to search them. And of course, the primary purpose of that is to allay or confirm the suspicions of the officer without actually arresting the person and taking them into custody. And I think it's important to know that when those officers exercise that power, that person isn't free to leave. And the officers, if they want to, can use reasonable search to search that person or that vehicle. However, and this is the important bit, the 4th bullet point on your screen, I can't emphasize it enough to you or our officers, they have to have reasonable grounds. That is the law. And I can't emphasize it enough. It's in capitals, it's in red, it's the circle around it. My officers will hear me say it day in, day out. In order for you to use that power, you've got to do it within the law. and you have to have reasonable grounds that you're going to find something. Now, sometimes there are forces in England and Wales that don't get that right, because when the HMIC come in and audit us and they take all our stop search records away, they will see that sometimes the grounds aren't good enough. They're not strong enough. And there's a big piece of work that I am doing now to audit our stop and searches to make sure they're lawful. Because if they are, I can come to these forums and defend anything in terms of disproportionality, because I will say I've reviewed them, I've audited them, and they are lawful. And I'm happy with those grounds. I was challenged by one of my own councillors in Newport recently following a full council. I met with that councillor individually about stop and search, and he asked me, do I think we're doing too much? And I come back to what the law says. Code A of the Police and Crime Evidence Act says stop and search can play an important role in the detection and prevention of crime. And that is why we are here, I believe, to detect and prevent crime. Stop and search is one tool in our toolbox to enable us to do that. And there are 4 very important elements. It has to be fair. It has to be legal, the grounds. The encounter has to be professional. And the use of those powers has to be transparent and accountable. Now, I make it even more simple for my officers, because my approach, I ask for 3 things of my officers, and I've had this portfolio for just over a year. And I know they're bored of hearing me say it because they started to repeat this back to me. So it must have registered somewhere. I ask them to focus on the grounds. When they're recording the grounds on the stop and search record, they have got to be absolutely certain that that search is legal. And what you think are grounds will be very different to what the law says. The bar is very high. And I give you an example. If my officers see somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning walking through Llanbraddock and they're a bit suspicious of him because he's got a hood up, that isn't reasonable grounds to stop and search that person. Most members of the public would think it is. It isn't. Now, we have all got streetcraft. We're all inquisitive. We'll want to speak to that person clearly at 2 o'clock in the morning with his hood up, looking a bit suspicious. And the grounds might develop when we speak to that person. But I know if an officer records on a form, person stopped at 2 o'clock in the morning, looking suspicious, that will fail our audit. So the bar is very high in terms of what the grounds are, and I am very firm with our officers on what is a legal search. So the grounds is emphasised vociferously. The second thing that I ask of those officers is that the quality of the encounter is there. And what do I mean by that? That they're showing that detained person the respect and courtesy that that person deserves. Very often they will stop and search people that they know, people who have criminal records. I want our officers to show the respect, professionalism and courtesy. The final thing, in terms of accountability and having an audit trail, is that those encounters are captured on the officer's body-worn camera that are personal issue. Every one of our officers has got a camera. That encounter needs to be recorded, all of it. And we're pretty much there now. 94–95% of the stops are recorded. In the last 12 months, we were 75%, huge improvement. Still, I'd like to see 100%, because if you know you're going to use one of these contentious powers, you've seen the headlines, why wouldn't you press record? Why wouldn't you? So, huge inroads. The stats are pretty good in terms of body-worn video. Our stats are pretty good in terms of how many pass our audits. But I wanted to share with you my strategy, my narrative for stop and search and use of force, because there are 4 key things that I look for, and they're documented. The scrutiny and governance needs to be there. And I talk about scrutiny from the pavement to the boardroom. I chair a quarterly scrutiny board. I know, because I chair it, that there's the appropriate scrutiny and governance. But that needs to be at every level of the organisation. The sergeants who review those stop and search records need to be sitting down with the officers, watching the body-worn camera, looking at the grounds and discussing whether that was legal, discussing the encounter. We have got very strong governance internally in the force. I think it's as good as anywhere in the country. And I say that with a degree of confidence because our inspectorate have invited other forces in to observe those meetings to take away some of the best practice. So the scrutiny and governance is very important in terms of my strategy. The second thing is around the training and awareness. Of course, officers, when they're new, will have training on the law, but they need to know some of the headlines that we've seen. They need to be aware of the public feeling. So ongoing CPD is extremely important. The oversight and engagement is something that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner are responsible for, working closely with us, Gwent Police. That is the independent scrutiny of stop and search and use of force. And again, I know that the processes that the Commissioner and his team have are very robust because I've invited an independent review of these processes and the feedback is very, very positive. That meeting is a quarterly meeting with our members of our independent advisory group. They watch the footage, they watch the use of force, they watch the stop and search, and they challenge and they offer their feedback. And I go to that meeting and I can tell you that the challenge is constructive and positive. So lots there in terms of the oversight and engagement. The performance data, we touched a little bit on this. Really important to understand the headline figures. The headlines in the newspapers often talk about race disproportionality rates, and we'll talk that in some forces, 18-1. You're 18 times more likely in some forces to be stop and searched if you're non-white than if you're white. The figures in Gwent are very low. The last quarter, quarter 1, the figures were 2.9. So you're 2.9 times more likely to be stop and searched if you're non-white than if you're white. That number is probably one of the lowest in the country, but it's still important that we understand it. And I have somebody sat in headquarters. I have commissioned somebody to look at these stop and searches. We review every non-white stop and search on a monthly basis to look at the grounds, to look at the quality of the encounter, to look at whether it was recorded on body-worn video. And I can tell you that most months, all of our non-white stop and searches pass our audit in terms of whether they were legal. So whilst there's still some disproportionality in the figures, I can come to meetings like this and say, hey, I can assure you I've looked at every one, and I can assure you that they were legal. And that gives me a degree of confidence when I come to meetings and present on this subject. I'm going to finish off on stop and search here. These are headline figures from 2019, 2020. I didn't use last year's figures because we operated in a number of lockdowns and we saw our stop and search numbers rocket during lockdown because people were out and about that shouldn't have been. And that gave officers those grounds to understand why they were out. So usually it's close to 4,000 stops every year. The majority of those stop and searches happen in my policing area in Newport, because we know that the majority of organised crime groups are residents of Newport. And of course, you would want us to be stopping people who are dealing drugs. So some headline figures there. Most happen in the east, although I will say, and it's because of a change in command here in the west of the force, and it's a positive change. we are seeing more and more stop searches happening in Blaenau Gwent, Caerphilly and Torfaen, which I think is welcome. Those stop and searches are audited. I know that they're valid, they're within the law. So I'm going to talk a little bit now, and I hope I haven't run on too much, about protest activity. We have seen the headlines, the George Floyd headlines, May last year. These are images from Gwent Police. They're not stock images from the internet. This is what we saw in Newport and Caerphilly, the strength of feeling during lockdown. This was during a period of lockdown. We had people on the streets wanting to voice their concern, show their strength of feeling. Again, images of Newport there, 300-400 people. On top of protests, we have to police disorder. Now, I know that this is an open meeting, it's being live streamed, and I'm not going to talk too much about these images. But these images were the night after a murder in June in Newport. I didn't expect to have disorder on the streets of Newport after that murder, because I know that we arrested the suspects within an hour. I didn't expect to see that on Friday night. I didn't expect to have to bring in mutual aid from South Wales Police specialists to deal with that. But that is what we have to confront. And I will talk to you about how these things, protest and disorder, are policed. But again, I wanted to touch upon the law, because people have a right to protest. Articles 9, 10 and 11 of the Human Rights Act allow them to protest on our streets. Freedom of expression, freedom of assembly and association. What it doesn't allow them to do is to violently protest the events that we saw in Bristol a couple of months ago. And I think when we see those violent protests, that we need to be robust with those people. And I can tell you that we sent officers to Bristol to provide mutual aid to Avon and Somerset, and we've had officers come in from Bristol to us to support us on some of our deployments. So it's a two-way flow. Interestingly, in the legislation, there is what we call a negative and positive duty on police. The police must not prevent, hinder, or restrict peaceful assembly. And there's a positive duty. I actually have to take reasonable steps to protect those who want to exercise their rights to peaceful protest. It's a balancing act. Getting it right is a balancing act. And the starting point for the police is to facilitate it. But I have to balance the needs with the protesters, with those affected by the protest. And it is a constant balancing act to get it right. Sometimes we don't often get it right. This is a direct extract from one of my public order strategies. So when you see protest, when you see public disorder, there's an officer of my rank, it'll either be me, Mark Hobra, the LPA commander here in Blackwood, or Tom Harding, who works with me in Newport, will set a strategy. We will take legal advice on our strategy, and very, very well supported by our joint legal services, who spend time going through our strategies and supporting us in terms of the legal position, particularly throughout COVID. Councillor Jordan, you've helped me with this. We had a protest in Newport, you and I, and we sat down with that protest organiser, because my strategy will always say, and I missed the words out here, to work with the organiser to minimise disruption to the affected communities, businesses and residential properties. My strategy aims will be to work with the event organiser to minimise adverse community impact and maintain the confidence. It will be to minimise disruption to the transport infrastructure. These are the things I'm thinking about all of the time when somebody tells me what they want to protest. Councillor Jordan and I have sat down in Bettis Rugby Club with an event organiser, trying to make that person see sense about what they wanted to do during COVID. And we try hard, and we use specialist officers. We will engage using a protest liaison officer. Councillor Jordan, I brought one with me, and we sat around that table and we tried to encourage the protest organiser to see a different way of doing things. So there's a strategy. And when we police these things, it isn't just the local officers from Ystrad Mynach or Bargoed or Caerphilly that turn up. It will be me setting that strategy, taking legal advice. I'll have a silver commander, usually an officer of chief inspector rank, quite senior officer. And I'll have a bronze commander, usually an officer of inspector rank. That is the command structure. I do the strategy. The chief inspector, the silver commander, will write me a tactical plan on how he or she will police that event. And I will sign off that plan to say, yes, I believe your plan will achieve my strategic intentions to minimise disruption, to minimise the impact on the community. We will have tactical advisors. I will have somebody advising me. I will have evidential gathering teams, people with cameras, video in the crowd to make sure if there are offences committed, we've captured them. I can use police dogs and police public support units. Our public support units, our officers that you see in those images, policing protest, policing the disorder, are trained. They are trained to a national standard. They have the appropriate equipment to wear when they're deployed to these events. So I call them the specialists because there's a lot of work that goes into policing protests. There's a lot of work that goes into policing significant disorder. A lot of written work, a lot of legal advice, and it is that balancing act all of the time. In my strategy, and I don't expect you to read all of this, it's a very wordy slide. I will have what I see as the preferred, acceptable or unacceptable outcomes of that protest. Now, of course, my preferred is that there's no crime or disorder, no antisocial behaviour, no disruption. I sometimes have to accept that there will be minor incidents of antisocial behaviour and crime. But when they do occur, they are dealt with quickly by the police officers and that they don't overly disrupt the wider force area. There are times I have to accept those things because I have to allow the protest to happen. The law says I have to allow peaceful protest. Sometimes that does cause disruption. The things I won't accept are serious disruption, serious injury, serious disorder, and that is when I think I should send my officers in and deploy them to deal with it and to deal with it appropriately. I talked a second ago about the public order officers that are deployed, and I talked about their training. These are images I've taken on my iPhone at our training facilities. They have training every year, refresher, so they're able to deal with whatever's in front of them. I take my hat off to those officers because it's something I never did, and I'm not sure I would want to do it. But they put themselves forward to deal with that disorder, that protest that you see. They're highly trained to negotiate, to communicate with protesters. I wanted you to know that when you see these headlines around stop and search and use of force, when you see the headlines around protest activity and disorder, there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that you don't see in terms of the planning for those events, in terms of the thought that goes into whether they should be allowed to happen or not. Very often we're dictated to by the legislation. When you see headlines around use of force and stop and search, that it is taken seriously by the force and by the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and that our governance, monitoring and scrutiny is very robust. I was going to say it's the best in the country. I don't think we're far off from that. I really don't.
Nail myself to speak. Thanks very much, Mike, for that really interesting presentation. There are a couple of indications. Councillor Theresa.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike, for the presentation. You mentioned body-worn cameras, and you mentioned them being switched on at a certain point. Is it normal to not have them on, and is it normal to have certain times when you need to switch them on? And the second question is regarding the conflict currently at M25. Have you got thoughts on views of how that particular protest is edging onto not being a good protest or whatever? Thank you, Chair.
Well, the first question around body-worn video. My expectations are we're very lucky in Gwent that they're personal issue. And some forces, they're not. It's been an investment for the force, an investment for the Police and Crime Commissioner to ensure from day one that every officer has one. And I think when you're using these powers and you know you're going to stop somebody, when you know you're going to use force on somebody, there needs to be a pretty good excuse not to turn that on. And I can't think of one. Unless the camera's faulty, unless the batteries run dry, I look at the data. I see on some of my stop and search records, my quarterly meeting on Tuesday, there was a reason called officer discretion. That doesn't wash with me. If you're going to use stop and search powers, use force, I don't think you should be put in. I haven't turned my camera on because of officer discretion. That's not good enough. So, Councillor Eason, in my view, body-worn video should be turned on all of the time. You're not going to draw me into the N25 issues, I'm sorry to say. You know, the law is the law, isn't it? You know, people are entitled to peacefully protest. But think about my strategic intentions in the slide I showed you around the impact that has on the economy. Think about the impact it has on traffic disruption. Those are things the Goal Commander in Surrey should be thinking about, I think, around, you know, whether those people should be moved quickly. And it is a balancing act, isn't it? It's a balancing act of allowing them the opportunity to protest and then thinking about the effect, the impact that has on the transport infrastructure and the economy. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. Mark, you did indicate if you... yeah.
Yes, that's I'm using my computer. Just to stop and search, what pressures or are there officers that are not to stop and search? How do they feel in that?
Well, that's a really good question. I thought you were going to say, are they under pressure to do it? There have been, and I'm sure there are forces that will say to their officers, get out and stop and search everything that moves because it prevents and detects crime. Yeah, there's an element of truth in that. But if your find rates are very low, you're not finding anything, you ultimately will lose the trust and confidence of the communities because you're stopping people and you're not finding anything and you're repeatedly stopping people. In terms of the pressures for me, yes, I've put a spotlight on stop and search in the last 12 months. And I think probably we've seen a slight decline in the numbers because of that. I'm very clear with the officers, those three things. You pretty much do what you want if your grounds are there. You know better than me. If the grounds are there for you to stop and search somebody, you do it. The other two things, you deal with that person in a professional, courteous way, and you turn your camera on. So it will be interesting to know what my officers feel. I can't help putting the scrutiny on this piece of work. It's important. But the message is very simple. Go and do it, use those powers. They're there for you to use, but do them in a lawful way and make sure you document the grounds properly. because I'll be looking.
Peter Nuttall, please. Should work when you press it, Peter. The big one in the middle? No. Try the one next door, Peter. All right. I assumed you lifted the lid.
It was interesting your example of stop and search 2 in the morning. Stop and search, but that didn't exclude presumably on a welfare level speaking. So it's not stop and search, just speaking to them, say, you know, etc. Is that a normal practice?
Yeah, I think that's what we call stop and account. That person is free to leave. Let's not forget, if you're going to use those powers, those stop and search powers, that person isn't free to leave. So you raise a valid point, and the officers all of the time will challenge me. When I say that wasn't quite good enough grounds, they will say, come on, boss, 2 in the morning. There's been a couple of burglaries in High Street and Clanbraddock in the last week. What do you expect me to do? Well, I expect you to act within the law. I expect you to stop and speak to that person, because that's our tradecraft. That's what we're taught. We're inquisitive. And I would imagine when you speak to that person, the grounds might develop, or they might not. That person might say, I am leaving my place of work and I'm going to the factory. Okay, on your way. If that person tries to run off, I'd expect those officers to be running after him or her. So I think sometimes they just got to use their communication, and I think that is what the HMIC, that's what the public expect, because there are times when we stop and search people, we're just going to work in the early hours, and our officers sometimes don't have that conversation. So my message to the officers is use your verbal communication, speak, have a conversation. If the grounds then develop, of course, exercise those powers.
The other. All right. On the Infra 5, we all know that's. Talk about line. It is a line. Regions to disrupt. And if we see not to actively stop that over again, then you probably.
Indeed.
Where's the law? Especially with the same people.
No, I agree, and I think I refer you to the slide in my presentation, and it was a very wordy one where I had my preferred outcomes, my acceptable and my unacceptable. Usually I have to accept some minor disruption when there's protest activity. I have to accept that. What I'm not prepared to accept, and it's usually in the unacceptable outcomes, is significant sustained disruption, significant sustained disorder. That's when I believe we have to intervene. That's when I believe you would want us to intervene. And those things are thought out very carefully in my strategy, following legal advice.
Deputy PCC.
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank Superintendent Richards for a really excellent presentation, bringing to life the approach and the commitment to both stop and search and to our use of force and policing of protest. And I think what we've heard is that the way that the Chief Constable ensures that these powers are used and our approaches are used within the force are highly professional, highly trained, and with good sound legal advice and support. And I think too often, you know, Mike has mentioned, but too often when we talk about this approach to policing, we talk about our frontline officers, we talk about our you know, PSU, we forget about people like our joint legal services. And I can tell you, and I can provide you with the assurance that our joint legal services have never been busier during the COVID period, providing excellent advice as the COVID legislation changed overnight within 24 hours, at the same time as providing excellent legal support in terms of continuing to support frontline officers in their use of legal powers for both stop and search and for policing a protest. And I also want to provide you with the assurance that this is a highly scrutinised area of the force's activity by the Commissioner, by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and by our independent advisory group. And I think that we need to pay tribute to our independent advisory group and the work that they do. Stop and search is an effective tool, but it's one tool in a vast toolbox. And I think that's the way we need to think about stop and search. And we need to ensure that we engage and build up the trust in our communities in how we undertake that work. But we do scrutinise the work that Mike is scrutinising, so we can provide that framework. And the most important aspect is that our approach to stop and search must be fair, it must be accountable, and it must be without discrimination. And that is the assurance I can provide you. And David Lammy has provided his reports that does say there is evidence, there is disproportionate use of stop and search for certain communities. And that's why we are dedicated, and the Chief Constable and the Commissioner are dedicated to making sure that our work across all of our services are fair, are provided with the inclusion of our communities, and will always challenge discrimination. And I think I just want to finally say, I want to commend the Chief Constable and all her officers in how they've policed protests during COVID. It's been exceptionally difficult to get that balance between freedom of protest when we're in lockdown. But I think what we have seen throughout the period of COVID is that the sensitivity and understanding that balance of protecting the community and enabling people to voice their right to protest has been, I think, very well managed by the Chief Constable and her teams.
Okay, talking about Larry, I don't have any other indications. Could I just finish with one? It seems to be a fine balance between getting it right and getting it wrong. And as you said, I can't think of any real excuse why somebody wouldn't have a camera switched on when they were doing this, because it's obviously easier to prove whether or not you've done got the process right. But there does seem to be maybe a cultural attitude in some forces and not in others. I mean, I suppose it's the Met Police that gets highlighted more often than not because of the way the media works. But the incident with the black athlete that the Commissioner apologised for, it was pretty obvious to most people that that just wasn't right. And it's bad news travels quicker, doesn't it? And you've only got to get one wrong, and you get 99 right, and it's the wrong one that people are concerned about. So I think it's reassuring to hear that the scrutiny is there as to whether people have done things properly. And I think most people wouldn't object to the process done properly, but the emphasis is getting it done properly, isn't it?
I can reassure you that scrutiny is there, and I smile this week that I have my quarterly board on Tuesday. The two chief inspectors
I'm speaking with muted again. So thanks again, Superintendent Mike Richards and Detective Chief Superintendent Nicola Brain for your earlier presentation. I understand that there are many other very important duties that you have to get on with, so you'll have the pleasure of leaving us for the rest of the meeting to get on with the rest of our meeting. But thanks again for your presentations, and I think we were told earlier they will both be available after the meeting. Yeah. Okay, diolch yn fawr. Okay. Maybe I don't know whether people would appreciate literally a 5-minute break while the officers are leaving. We've done an hour and a half, and we've got quite an agenda to go through. So if we could have a little break now and then, we need to plow on with the rest of the meeting. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I think everyone's back, so we'll press on. So get this right. So are we back online, Kath?
We haven't stopped. We have to continue, otherwise we have two different recordings, you see.
No, but the public are now looking in again.
Yeah, we can't stop here. We have to carry on. So it hasn't stopped.
No.
Right. No, I want. What I was conscious of that we didn't actually go around with a quick introduction earlier. So if we can just do that as quickly as we can. I'm Councillor Colin Mann, Caerphilly County Borough, and if we go this way, live and around. Oh, sorry, Peter. Then sorry.
Peter Nazo.
Clive.
Clive Moretti.
Councillor Tony Easton, Monmouthshire County Council.
If you could put your mics down when you're speaking. You need to lift the lid, Doug. Lift the back lid.
Mark Spencer, Newport City Council.
David Fowler, Newport.
Larry Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Morning, everybody. Sam Slater, the new head of strategy in the OPCC.
Okay, and the.
Hi everybody, Rosanna Davis, and I'm the Principal Finance and Commissioning Manager for the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Okay, thanks everyone. So if we now go, if my memory serves me right, we're back to item 7, which is to receive and answer any questions of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. We do have one submitted by the Chair, Mrs. Jill Howells. Do you have a copy of the question, Larry? It's probably, for the record, it's best if I read the question out, I think. Your office has recently put out posts on social media for feedback on policing priorities for Gwent. In the comments on the post from your office shared by Gwent Police, there were a lot of statements about the lack of support / response from Gwent Police. Comments mainly referred to a lack of response when reporting crimes and stating why bother providing responses to any survey, as it does not make any difference. In light of this, do you have any views on the scale or proportion of crime reported to Gwent Police, which does not result in any follow-up action being taken with the person who reported the incident?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Jill, the Chair of the panel, for the question. And I know Jill is actively listening to us and has even tweeted about the quality of the 2 presentations we've just had. So delighted, Jill, that you are so ever present with us here this morning. Thank you for the question. I think it's a really important question because it really comes to the heart of how we build confidence in our communities, confidence in our public about our policing response. And I think it's really important, and I understand why the question is asked, and I know that comments on social media cause great concern, and I think they also can lead to people perhaps building a picture of our level of service that may be misleading. And I want to reassure you that the quality of our service, the quality of the service that Gwent Police provides is of greatest concern to the Commissioner and to the Chief Constable. And because of that, we correspond regularly and discuss with the Chief Constable and her chief officers about the concerns raised on social media because these matters are so important. And I know that from speaking to chief officers, there are a small number of responses against a large number of reports that are handled daily by Gwent Police, and that officers and staff will always try their very best to respond to all reports. Demand can be complex and challenging, and it's difficult to comment on any specifics in relation to any calls that haven't been answered, certainly that are messaged through social media without full and specific details. And it is really important that we expect our officers and staff to manage expectations of the public. And if then we must ensure that that is properly communicated and properly explained to members of the public, to victims, in relation to why that might be. So I think my understanding is those numbers of occurrences are small, but they are, as the question indicates, have been part of social media commentary in relation to the engagement we had in our policing crime plan. So I want to reassure you that there is a robust monitoring process in place to make sure that all calls are responded to in a timely way, and that we manage inquiries into Gwent Police. Performance is managed by the force on a range of crimes to make sure that we are dealing with them appropriately. But I also would want to stress that there is a robust complaints process, so that if people feel that they have not had the response that they should receive from the police, then they can contact the complaints department, and that can be investigated and properly responded to. So that if you feel that you haven't been dealt with reasonably and proportionately by Gwent Police, then you can take action. As we've spoken about, I think at our last policing crime panel, we've also invested in a victim care unit, and we want to make sure that victims are kept up to date on the progress of their investigation into their concerns, into the crime that they have reported, and that we also make sure that we provide feedback to victims on an ongoing basis, and that they help shape our response and our service. I think it's worth noting that within the first 3 months of this financial year, Gwent Police dealt with 65,101 calls and 21,999 calls. So there's been a significant increase in the demand placed on both our force control room and our frontline staff since the previous years, and that we are working hard to ensure that we deliver that high standard of service. So I can provide you with that reassurance. But I think at the heart of the question is, you know, what troubles me most about the question is that people won't be bothered to report crime. And I think that's the most important aspect that we need to pick up. We need to ensure and provide trust in our communities to get people to report crime, so that we can properly investigate, so that we can respond, and so that we can ensure that we understand the trends that are happening in our communities. And throughout the summer, the Commissioner, with the Gwent Police We Don't Buy Crime team, visited communities and businesses across all local authorities, and heard too many times of people saying, I just haven't bothered to report crime. And I know Chief Superintendent Tom Harding, who leads our We Don't Buy Crime work, is absolutely committed to ensuring that we get the message out there that we must encourage the public to report crime, and that we will respond and ensure that an appropriate response is provided.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Dr. Howard. Yeah, it's a case of confidence, isn't it? Because if someone's received bad service, whatever the situation, they will think twice about doing the same thing again. If you go to a shop and it's shut, you think twice about whether to bother again. So it is a difficult one, but I know some members of the panel did actually manage to get to the force control room a little while back. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get there at the time, but and I think that was an interesting visit. Clive is nodding here, and from the exercise that we did, asking for people's experience, I did feed in a number of complaints which I had locally to the control room, and I think most, I'll say most, I think there's one query still outstanding, but so when they are brought to attention, there is normally a way of resolving it. But we all know that not all crime is reported anyway. So we need to do what we can to encourage people to report what they do, as you said. Okay, Councillor Tony Eason.
Yeah, thank you once again, Chair. Thank you, Larry, for your report. I note your comments on the back of our Chair's question that there should be better feedback to, or improved feedback to, those people who have been victims of crime and there's no further action taken. I think that's an important element of communication from the police and yourselves. And I got my, oh, but this one is it?
Yeah, lift the lid.
Yeah, I got it right over. Right over. Try that then. I think you got the best part I said at the beginning about Jill's question. But rural crime. Are you confident that the Chief Constable is fully on top of rural crime? I don't see any statistics in the reports of what the level of rural crime is in the county, in the whole of all over the county of Gwent. We've got different sorts of rural crime. We've got rural crime in Caerphilly as opposed to rural crime in parts of Monmouthshire. Different, but they boil down to be the same essence in any case. Are you confident that we are on top of, and have we got the right statistics to show that we are dealing with rural crime as it happens? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Tony. Anyone else? Don't see any other indications. No. Okay, in that case.
Sorry, Chair, do you want me to answer the...
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Yes.
Apologies.
No problem at all. Thank you for the question. And rural crime is a really important aspect I had my computer on mute. Too many buttons. I'm with you, Councillor Eason. It's having to unmute everything. So thank you for the question on rural crime. It's a really important aspect of crime that we have to deal with across all our local authority areas. Sometimes we automatically think of one or two particular of our authorities as being rural, but I think all of our local authority areas have significant rural communities. We've had a dedicated rural crime team in Gwent Police for a number of years, but more recently the rural crime team is located within the We Don't Buy Crime initiative. And we do want to bring a presentation when you have time in your work programme to highlight the work of the We Don't Buy Crime MT in particular. But we've been fortunate to spend time with the rural crime team, who is dedicated to tackling rural heritage and wildlife crime, works very closely with local communities, farmers across our rural areas. And the Commissioner went out recently with the rural crime team, stopped in Caerphilly and saw firsthand the impact of fly tipping, where the impact of waste strewn around our beautiful countryside. I think that was around Machyn Mountain. Just provides a really serious blight on our communities. And we don't necessarily realise that is the impact of serious and organised crime. Some of those areas of work that Chief Superintendent Brain was talking to us before. So I think we work very hard with the rural crime team to strive to work with farmers, with our communities, with the NFU. We're currently providing victim support packs to farms who have been victims of crime, and we are assisting people to have safe water, street markers to be able to mark their equipment and to really fight against crime targeted to our rural communities. So from my perspective, we are building this area of work, Councillor Eason. We have a dedicated team. I've spent quite a lot of time myself with the team, and they are absolutely committed to supporting our rural communities. But I feel confident that with the rural crime team joining forces with our We Don't Buy Crime team, that our effectiveness in this area will be greatly increased.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I saw you with the wellies on.
Okay, so item 8 is the verbal update by the Police and Crime Commissioner, which I'm sure Larry will be giving us. Do you prefer to go through it and then come back to questions afterwards? Yeah. Okay, so we do have a few questions. You'll be surprised now.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm aware of our time. So I'm wanting to introduce the report that is tabled for you. So it's not a verbal report. Under item 8, you do have a written report from the Commissioner that looks at the areas of work since we last reported to you. I would want to be highlighting the achievements both of the force and of our office, but in particular to welcome Rose Davis, Sam Slater, who are both here with us and who have introduced themselves to you during our round of introductions, but also online to Alex Warren, who's also joined the team as our new apprentice working on digital communications. And we're delighted to be able to invest and encourage and provide an opportunity for one of 14 new apprentices across the Gwent Police and Gwent Police and Crime Commissioner's Office family that we are really pleased to be able to be supporting across a whole range of functions in our offices. I'm not going to go through the report in any detail. It is tabled for you for information, and I know and I welcome the questions that you will be wanting to ask in relation to the report. I would just highlight really the continued exceptional performance during continued exceptional circumstances. That's all we can really say, and place on record the recognition and thanks of both the Commissioner and myself to the Gwent OPCC staff and to the police officers and staff across Gwent Police for their continued delivery and effort in this period.
Okay, thanks, Larry. The first note I have is from Councillor Tunney, and I think you've got a couple of. You've covered that. You're happy you've covered that one already. Oh, okay. There's one from our chair, and again, please indicate to anyone else if you're not on the list. It's the incidents on page 34, Larry. Has there been any progress on providing the panel with an annual breakdown of the incidents so that members can understand the incident activity? Sorry? Oh, sorry, I've managed to jump the gun. Sorry, it's the performance. It's the performance one. Sorry. I think there were a couple of others on this particular.
They were all Tories.
Sorry.
There were 3 from Tory.
Yeah.
Antisocial behaviour, page 26. New officers.
Yeah. I think, did I have one? I don't know. Yeah, sorry, there is one for yeah, we're told how many new officers are coming in, but obviously that's got to be balanced by the people who are retiring, etc. Would you have any idea whether we have a net increase in officers in the force?
Thank you, Chair, for the question about the numbers of officers that we have. Obviously, an absolute commitment and priority of the Police and Crime Commissioner is to increase the numbers of officers and staff across Gwent Police. That has been a commitment during the previous term for the Commissioner, and it remains a commitment in this current term. We are fortunate to be beneficiaries of Operation Uplift, which is a commitment across England and Wales to increasing the numbers of officers within police forces, but in particular, our human resources, our people services, our recruitment services are really focusing on ensuring that we recruit and have our workforce planning absolutely at the forefront of our work. In terms of managing all of that, there is a gold group that runs across Gwent Police that ensures that we have good workforce planning and that we are making sure that we recruit our proportion of the 20,000 new officers across England and Wales. In relation to this year and the question you're asking, we have a target of 1,423 officers for this financial year for 2021-22, and our actual numbers currently are 1,399. I was delighted to join the Chief Constable and the Deputy Chief Constable on Friday at the passing out parade. Unfortunately, we weren't able to extend, as usual, the invitation to attend to panel members to join us at the passing out parade, where we had 31 new officers passing out and who have joined communities across Gwent since them achieving their qualifications and their initial training. We are expecting another 45 to pass out in October, and our plans continue to ensure that we have that cohort in place during the year. But I think you're right in terms of saying that for every new officer, we may have leavers and people who in particular will be reaching the end of their service and may be retiring. So this year the target is 2007 new officers. We know that we are expecting 72 officers to retire and a further 42 who are intending to leave the service for a range of reasons, mostly 50% of that 42 who are transferring to other forces due to personal circumstances and wanting to perhaps move to another community. So we have 2000, I wish we had 2007 new officers. We have 207 new officers projected for this year with 114 leavers, which means that we will have a net increase of 93. But as I say, we are delighted to be joined by so many new officers who are joining our communities, but also our PCSOs and our specials who are all being recruited at the moment. So at the moment we are running on a net increase of officers, and as I say, the priority for the Commissioner is to increase the number of officers and staff across the force.
Okay, thanks. You mentioned people transferring out. Do we get many transferring in, do you know?
Yes, we also have transferees into Gwent Police, equally for a number of reasons, for people perhaps who have trained and started their service in other parts of the country and who want to locate back to Gwent and back to Wales. But we also have transferees in for particular skills. So we may be looking for people from other forces who may be able to assist us in particular areas where we may need additional resources and support.
Again, they're included in that number you gave us anyway. What's the situation with getting civilian staff in for particular skills as well? Because I think sometimes officers are wasted on certain skills which could easily be done, or maybe more competently be done by civilians. But because of the rundown over the past years, they're not available. So is that being worked on as well?
The skill mix and making sure we have officers undertaking the roles that we need warranted officers to undertake, and that we have police staff with their experience is something that we, acutely manage, that we have really sound planning, workforce planning, and that goal group who really identify how do we best use the right skill mix and the right level of professional status in all of our roles, and that is something that is very closely worked through, and I can assure the panel that we undertake to have the right people doing the job, not just in terms of where we can deploy people from.
I think it's particularly an issue maybe in the performance figures that the chair has been chasing quite often. Right. So there was one outstanding question, I think, Tony, about Youth Week. Are you okay with that? Or yeah, we'll leave that one go. Okay then. Okay. Thanks, Lady. Talking about where are we? So item 11 is the performance against the police and crime plan, Q1.
Thank you, Chair. You have a performance pack tabled under this agenda item. It is there for your consideration, and I will welcome questions that you may have relating to it. I would want to commence really by just saying that as a performance pack, the area of performance and reporting to this committee and this panel has been one of significant interest and commitment, and we have really benefited from the work of the chair, yourself as vice chair, and the performance subgroup in trying to ensure that we provide the data and the narrative reporting that will enable you to scrutinise both the performance of Gwent Police, but also, most importantly, the performance of the Commissioner and his team. And I think really it's an opportunity in presenting this report to say that when we come to the next item on the agenda, which is the Policing Crime Plan, the new Policing Crime Plan will provide us with the opportunity to almost draw a line under this reporting regime and performance regime and create that new framework going forward. So the limitations that there may be and frustrations there may be in this current set of performance data, I feel confident that Sam and the team working with Sam, both in Gwent Police and across the Gwent PCC, will be ensuring, working with the performance subgroup, that we build that framework that can properly report against the Policing Crime Plan priorities, our commitments, our achievements and our outcomes. So I think we do need to have a performance framework that reflects both the police performance, but also our performance in relation to our monitoring of police activity and looking at our engagement, our success and our commissioning successes. In presenting this report, I can provide you with the assurance that we have scrutinised Gwent Police performance in both the Commissioner's strategy and performance board, but also the Chief Executive, the Chief Finance Officer and myself also scrutinise the force through a series of board governance and assurance framework meetings, and can provide that extensive, more detailed assurance against performance. So I would welcome your continued engagement. I think I would like to encourage a meeting of the performance subgroup to work with Sam as the new head of strategy to start to build the performance framework around the new policing crime plan, and that we look to having more capacity and support in terms of analyst capacity to ensure that we provide the appropriate data. One of the things I do want to stress is that, and I know over the years we've spoken about baselines and comparative years. One of the things that is increasingly challenging because of the impact of COVID is looking at comparisons back to pre-COVID years and situations that might occur now as we move through the impact of COVID. So I think we need to recognise that performance reporting during the COVID years brings its own inherent challenges. And I know that in some areas of public service business, for example, in education, actually reporting against pre-COVID times is almost impossible in terms of understanding the areas of work. So just to highlight some areas that the Commissioner has been particularly focusing on to give assurance has been looking at crime reduction targets, and knowing that in relation to Operation Uplift, we have to be able to assure that we will reduce crime, and we are confident that the force is on track to do that. We have spoken a number of times at this panel about crime data integrity, in making sure that we have the appropriate crime recording, and that we know that HMIC will be in particular looking at the performance against crime data integrity, and I can provide you assurance on that. We've seen a continued reduction in burglary, We have particularly focused on the impact of violent crime in our communities and making sure that we have a plan to deal with violent crime. As we know, this panel focused very closely on rape and sexual assault and domestic abuse at our last meeting. And again, we have a real close focus on performance in this area. And we're looking particularly at the issue around child and adult safeguarding referrals and trends. And as Chief Superintendent Brain mentioned previously, through the multi-agency safeguarding hubs now, we feel that we can demonstrate our close partnership working with our local authorities in terms of our performance in these areas. I know again that 101 and 999 have been an area of particular concern to you as a panel. I'm really pleased that the panel and were able to go and see the force control and understand our areas of work, and we will endeavour that statistics in relation to 101 and 999 are included in future packs. So I think the one thing I would want to really draw attention to in terms of the data that's in the report is the continued success of our volunteers and our citizens in policing, and in particular of our specials. We have really benefited from an increase in the numbers of specials across our force area, but the number of hours that our special constabulary provide to our communities across Gwent is phenomenal, and I would want to place on public record my thanks to them as volunteers for what they do day in and week in, week out in providing support to our communities. So I will leave the presentation of the report there, and we'll happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thanks again, Lady. Do we have, I have a number of questions here. Tony, do you want to start? Councillor Eason?
Yeah, thank you, Larry, for the report. I find this report very hard to facilitate, to be honest.
Sorry?
Yeah,
oh, have you unmuted your?
Oh, I got that one on, that one.
It's a challenge.
Too many buttons. Too many buttons. Thank you, Larry, for your report. I find this report very hard to assimilate, to be quite honest. There's too many figures there and so many references about impact on recorded crimes and who's doing it once, twice and three times. But the thing that stands out strongly to me is offences against a person, such as rape and sexual offences. You indicate in your report that they've reduced. Well, yes, they've reduced on the timescale you mentioned, but overall they're going up again at the moment. So I don't know whether there's a better way of producing this information, but could you particularly comment on offences against the person, particularly sexual offences and rape, which I know that Jill was concerned about as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eason, and I agree with you. I think we can do better in terms of how we structure this report and how we provide this narrative to you. So I would like to ask for the panel's continued support and commitment. And I know that you have really always been proactive in your support in working with Sian and with Sam to really look at how we can structure this better, using the framework of the new police and crime plan to be able to provide the reassurance to you and to the public of Gwent that we are achieving the objectives and the vision set out in the police and crime plan. But I think the question around rape is really important, and yes, we are seeing better performance, but we're also seeing increases in sexual offences. So I think there's both the investigation and the ability to deploy our resources to achieve the outcomes that we need in terms of sexual offences and rape. We are seeing an improved performance, but we're also seeing an increase in the reporting of rape and sexual offences. And some of that, certainly working with our safeguarding colleagues in local authorities, is as a result of the decreasing, the unlocking of lockdown, in people coming forward perhaps to public services for the first time for almost 18 months, and in particular in seeing schools recommence and in contacting and families being in contact, in particular with our colleagues in education. So we know from our discussions at the last panel that our performance nationally, not just in Gwent, is not where we want it to be on rape and sexual offences. There is a national action plan on rape and sexual offence that is driven by the UK government, but the Welsh government equally are concerned about the performance around rape and sexual offence. There is a new national rape and rape and sexual offences action plan that is owned by the Police Service and the Crown Prosecution Service. We have a joint rape action plan for Wales, and there is one for Gwent as well. So we, as you will remember, we have undertaken within Gwent, within the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner in Gwent, a review of our rape services. The Chief Constable is due to report against that review to the Commissioner by December, and I think in our last meeting we said that we would share the Chief's response with yourselves, and then at that point have an opportunity to have a real focus on our rape services. Our colleagues in Avon and Somerset undertook a very detailed review of Operation Bluestone into the delivery of rape services. A number of forces, five forces across England and Wales, are replicating that through support by the Home Office, and that's an operation called Operation Syria. And we are hoping, and we're in discussion yesterday with our police colleagues across Wales, to be able to replicate Operation Soteria here in Gwent. So I feel confident that our scrutiny on our rape performance is probably as tight as it possibly can, but our commitment and determination to improve in this area is even greater. But as I see, what those figures and the complexity of those figures is that whilst we have better performance in quarter one on the investigation of rape, we're also seeing an increase. Those are areas that we are absolutely focused on.
Yeah, thanks. And this is a subject of ongoing discussion with the Chief, I imagine. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, fine.
Yeah, you've got your mic on. I wondered if you wanted to come back.
No, I just want to say thank you.
Okay. Flicking one page back, Larry, is a question on incidents from the Chair.
Yeah.
Has there been any progress on providing the panel with an annual breakdown of the incidents so that we as members can understand the incident activity? Obviously, this would help with the understanding of how it relates to criminal activity.
So we are achieving progress, but I think the challenge is trying to determine how much data and the volume of reporting in this area. So what I would request, Chair, is whether we could take this back to the performance group, because I think we are able to draw that data down, but it's being really clear how best to present it in a way that would be meaningful and not just be more lists of data, which I don't actually think is going to help this panel. So with your indulgence, I would like to defer that really back to the performance group so that we can really work on how we can provide that information in a meaningful way and a consistent way.
Okay, thanks. Jason, you wanted to, Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, thanks. It's just more of a recognition as well.
You muted on the machine.
There we are.
It's a challenge.
I did press it. Honest, trust me.
It's a challenge.
It's just talk about what O'Leary said. I mean, with recognition with the special constabulary as well, with the amount of hours they've put in, you know, as a panel, we should also recognise that as well as a panel, and to all other officers as well who've worked through the COVID situation as well. You know, they have put a tremendous amount of hours in the specials as well, you know, to help the force. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say. Thanks.
Can I just thank Councillor Jordan, because I think the work of our Special Constabulary is unique, you know, in terms of that contribution, and I think we really must commend. And the Chief Constable has her staff officer here with us at the in the panel, Oliver Petty, and if I could ask Oliver to take that back to the Chief Constable, so that we can really make sure that we send that message directly from the panel to our Special Constabulary, recognising their contribution and the fact that we really do value their support.
I'm sure the whole panel would wish to be associated with those remarks. Okay, thanks. Page 39, there's it mentions 12% crime. It talks about an offender has committed a crime this year. Now, obviously, unless that's a rolling year, the first quarter, second quarter wouldn't be very meaningful. Do you know if it's a rolling year or not?
I'm going to ask Sam to pick that one up.
Michael,
rolling year, so it's giving you the past 12.
Okay, it wouldn't make much sense if it wasn't, would it? No. Okay, page 40 is about investigation outcomes. And again, this is one from the chair, showing a significant figure over 3,000 cases where the victim has withdrawn support, even though a named suspect was identified. A significant increase for this quarter based on the previous 6 months. What are the factors which are contributing to this, and does it affect a particular category of crime where victims are reluctant to progress a case? I think this is one that a couple of us sort of noticed and wanted airing. Thanks.
No, and it's a really challenging one to answer, and I think probably one that, again, we will take away and provide you with a more detailed answer in terms of looking at those statistics and the reasons behind them. But I think that the reasons for victims withdrawing from their complaints, I think, is a challenging one, and one which may be due to a number of reasons. Some of that may be around confidence. Some of it may be, you know, that they have had second thoughts about wanting to take a complaint forward. It may be the complexity of the criminal justice system. So I think that victims and victim support and keeping victims engaged in their investigation and their confidence in our service is what we need to be focusing on in making sure that we really understand the performance in these areas. So victims deciding not to pursue a complaint and withdrawing is quite a complex area, and one that we will provide further information on.
I think
usually on the victim withdrawing, it's on domestic violence. Yeah.
Okay, I think this leads us into another question on page 41.
Yes, it's a bit concerning again, isn't it, that it's only feedback is 55%. So I just wondered what moves would be done or are being taken to increase this number, this percentage.
It is concerning, and you know, victim satisfaction rates are an area of, again, a priority of focus for the Commissioner, and that's why the Chief Constable and the Commissioner have recently launched the Victim Care Unit and are really looking at how we provide support to victims from the moment they first come into contact with an officer or a member of staff responding to them. That might be in the force control room, that might be by a response officer from a local policing team, that from that moment on that we think about their victim support and their victim care. So victim care is something that is absolutely a priority and that we are committed to, and we want to see an improvement in. The victim care unit will provide dedicated officers and staff in being able to update victims, in also being able to determine the vulnerability of victims and whether victims who may have been impacted by a particular crime may be also in need of other services due to their vulnerability, or that perhaps they have come forward because of a burglary, but actually there may be some other issues of concern in that family around exploitation or safeguarding concerns. So from our perspective, this is through the new victim care unit, an area that we are absolutely prioritising. And I attended the victims board, as did Sam, last week, where we scrutinised the performance of Gwent Police in more detail around victim support. And the chair of the board, Assistant Chief Constable Ian Roberts, who many of you know, wanted me to pass on to you as a panel, either to come and visit the victim care unit or to receive a presentation from the victim care unit, because I think we want to be able to demonstrate to you how much of a focus and commitment we have to try and really impact a change in this area in particular.
It's being kept informed is a crucial thing in a way, isn't it? Because the police can do a wonderful job solving crimes, but if the victim doesn't know anything about it, obviously then they're not going to be happy. And I mean, there is, on those figures we were looking at, there is 75% for the most recent for 2021 to date. It's a question of whether those figures can be maintained, really. And are you reasonably confident that will? I'm certainly. Sorry, you've got a volunteer too.
Well, I'll bring Sam in, but I think what I can provide you is the assurance that certainly we've seen an improvement, and we want to, and everything that we are doing is to continue in a positive direction in seeing an improvement in those services. Sam, apologies.
Okay.
Can you comment on something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that there's a quirk in the data as well, and this is something that we've obviously Larry's alluded to in terms of wanting to work with the subgroup in terms of making it more digestible, the data that's coming along. So that 55% figure is of the previous 2 years, because the script has slightly changed for this year in terms of what gets asked. So you're not comparing like for like, and so again, I'm very keen to be working with yourself to do this information, how it tends to make choice far more easy to understand and digestible.
Yeah, I often feel there's an agenda where people change the rules because it stops you giving a meaningful sort of comparison, and it's a way of hiding things that people want hiding at times. But Clive, you want to?
Well, it's just
that it is more confusing now, isn't it? Where you have a step change and variation, so the sooner perhaps here again we can have a definitive route on this, better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Larry?
Chair, thank you. I can give you my assurance that this is systems and not the fact that we're trying to hide or change or make this any less digestible for you as a panel. So I think I certainly would want to come back, Chair, to your previous comment and say that, our intention is to be as transparent as possible for both ourselves, for the Commissioner, for you as a panel, and for the public of Gwent. So there is no changing to make this less understandable. We're not changing systems to try and hide anything. What we really want to make sure is that we are providing the data and the information in a way that helps everybody understand where our progress is being made and where we have concerns and need to focus our attention and resources to ensure that we see progress in performance.
I think my comment was aimed at people probably outside this organisation who. But okay, thanks again. There's one on page 42 from Councillor Easton on repeat offenders. Tony, some clarification, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the repeat offenders come up, and it's difficult to work out from the figures where the how many. Oh, it's difficult. You've got three channels there of repeat offenders and repeat victims. Where do the two fit in? That's what I'm looking at. Is there any connection?
So I suppose that question, I think, is an illustration where I don't think this report is very helpful, because actually, what does that say? What does that mean? And what does that mean for the community? What does that mean for victims? And what does that mean for offenders? And what are we actually doing about it? And so I think this is where we tie ourselves up in knots in some respects by looking at the data instead of actually trying to say, well, what is the real issue around repeat offending? How are we managing our offenders? Do we understand where our most prolific offenders are, where they're doing the most damage to communities, and how we are tackling that? And I chair the Gwent Criminal Justice Board for the Commissioner, which includes oversight around our offender management of both Gwent Police and the Probation Service. And we are doing an awful lot on how we need to be managing our offenders and understanding our offenders. And we're currently, as part of our partnership work with our probation service, doing a pilot on repeat offenders, which we're calling the revolving door pilot. But it's exactly because of what I think is behind some of these figures but you won't ever see drawn out in the figures, is that there will be a cohort that the police are dealing with that continuously are coming back into our service. And what we want to do is build effective ways of challenging that, in getting better outcomes, so that communities are safer and that we don't have police officers having to deal continuously with repeat offenders. So making sure that we understand what is driving that offender behaviour and providing adequate ways of rehabilitation and enforcement, sentencing, but also, making sure that if there are issues that need to be addressed, like housing or education, that we will do so.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is illustrated as well when you talk about missing children. Is it the missing child 4 times, 5 times, twice? The statistics there don't sort of stack up either. It's a similar situation, I think.
Absolutely, and I think again, maybe we can ask the performance subgroup to have a look at it, because I'm not sure whether the data actually helps. Because, as you say, for some children, they will have one missing episode will have a significant, long-lasting life experience. Whereas for another child, they may go missing on a repeated level, but that impact, or on a more frequent level, but that impact may be very different. So from our perspective, we do have a missing children's team, as you know, in Gwent. The missing children's team is now closely located within the local safeguarding hubs, and the safeguarding hubs are where our officers are co-located with your social workers, with your frontline safeguarding officers, and we have a probation staff, and we have somebody from Nara and Bevan there as well with the missing children's team, really making sure that when something happens, we understand the implications and that we can build the best resources and best response, whether that's a police officer, whether that's actually going out and locating somebody, or whether that's a social worker or a family support worker, being able to support parents to look after and support their children more effectively in their homes and communities.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Are we? Okay. Yeah. Are we still benefiting from the work that was done by former Chief Jeff Farrer on missing children? There was a lot of work done a few years ago, wasn't there? And I think there was a question raised within the panel about what sort of proportion of these missing children are maybe disappearing from children's homes on a regular basis, whether whether that can be sort of identified.
Certainly, I mean, we don't have that data with us today, but that's certainly something we can provide to the panel. But the issue around certainly the work that Jeff Farah led through the Breaking the Cycle team and the establishment of the Missing Children's team is the legacy that our missing children's teams are working on now. So I think I can assure you that certainly the issue around providing an effective response to missing children is one that's at the forefront of our minds. And we also work very closely with Welsh Government in relation to understanding the issue of missing children, and in particular our care experienced young people. The Deputy Chief Constable and myself lead on child-centred policing for the 4 forces in Wales, which is very much looking at ensuring that we provide the best service we can to our children who are in our local authority care and who are housed either in foster care or in residential care, and that we don't in any way criminalise children and young people. But again, if that's an area that the panel would like further information on, that is something we can follow up.
Okay. Thanks for that one. You're asking about partnership activity on page 51, Tony.
Sorry, what was that, Chair?
Partnership activity, page 51. You okay with that?
Yeah, I missed that somehow. Sorry about that, I missed that.
Yeah, it's partnership activity to address hotspots, I think.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. What I was looking at was you've got partnership activity to address hotspots. You've got 5 community safety hubs. I want to know where are where are those hubs, and how do they interact with the 5 or the 2 of the East LPA and the West LPA and the actual boroughs.
So we have got problem-solving hubs that are located around our sort of local authority areas and work effectively to engage with local communities, with your local authority services to coordinate our activities. We can again provide more information in terms of the actual location of the hubs. But certainly from my perspective, it really is a good example of partnership working with our local authority colleagues to understand the impact of antisocial behaviour on our communities, and then to deploy resources around those hubs in a very problem-solving way. So certainly we have problem-solving teams now that are delivering to understand the needs of our communities. And I've seen some excellent work over the summer months where, through the work of our problem-solving teams and the work that the Commissioner has supported community organisations to deliver diversionary and community activity, we have been able to deploy work from organisations like Positive Futures, providing youth sport interactions to actually then counteract antisocial behaviour in some communities. So we've been able to work through those hubs and problem-solving ways to deploy resources, working with the local policing team, with local community organisations and sports organisations to combat antisocial behaviour in our communities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, there is a question about complaints on page 53, and it's about making this more understandable, and also about 999 and 101 calls, and again getting proper information on that. I think these are things that Kath can probably feed into, and you can ask us. There are things I think that have certainly been raised previously, but it's whether we're making any progress on them. Okay, Ron. Oh, okay. I'm just going to say, oh, sorry, yes, you have it. Sorry, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me just a moment. It's an observation. It's on page 46. Looking at the pie chart, It's a little confusing because we don't have colour sheets here, and the bullets just denote which area is there. It's a little unclear. I just wonder whether or not that could be modified so it would be easier to read as such. All right, sorry. Okay, I was just thinking for you. Thank you.
Yeah, some of these things are not brilliant in black and white. But I mean, they are in colour on the machine, I think.
Okay, so if we can press on to. Sorry. Oh, John, sorry, John, I didn't see a hand on here, so.
Okay. What do I press on this?
Councillor John, sorry, lift the lid up. Lift the lid and press the button in the middle.
Okay, I wanted to develop the questions around the missing children on page 43 and the second paragraph, second sentence in that, because I don't really understand, well, I understand it, I don't know what I'm supposed to construe from it, so I think I'm confirming what has been said earlier, that it might be useful to have those statistics putting clearly as to which children, young people are the ones who have run away from a care home and which ones are others from within the community. I was interested in, because I'm interested in partnership work, I was interested in who you refer to as being the services that might assist with that. And I understand that when it's from a care home, that would be more likely to be social services. But I think I was a bit concerned that you're still talking about social services when it's from home, because I would have thought that the service that I would want to do partnership with would be youth service on that, because I think the social worker element is actually might have a counterproductive effect, whilst the youth service, the youth worker might have a productive effect.
Thank you, Councillor Click. Thank you for that question, because I think it's a really important distinction to make, and one that I haven't referred to in my previous answer. So please apologies from my perspective. So as part of the Missing Children Service that is co-located now with the Safeguarding Hubs, we have the SAMI, which is a third sector voluntary organisation, but particularly employing youth workers as part of our debrief service. So the delivery of the service to missing children when they are located and then before they're taken back home or as they've been taken back home, there will be a SAMI worker who can work with that child to ascertain whether they're from a care home or from, or from living in a family environment or in the community, will determine if there is anything that needs following up. But those workers are deliberately not a police officer and not a social worker for the reasons that you're particularly alluding to. The importance of building that trusted adult interaction with the young person so that we can understand what was the reason that they've gone missing, and understand where the best service provision, whether that is the social worker, whether it is a specialist support service, or whether it's the family support services that local authorities have as well, in a more proactive way. So the response at that point, and I think that this just again exemplifies why 2.3 doesn't tell the story at all, does it? In terms of the complexity of children who go missing, the reasons they go missing, the characteristics of those who are going missing, and then the wraparound support service and that partnership working that we are doing to ensure that we are meeting the needs of that child, that family, and supporting them so that they aren't in that vulnerable position of going missing again.
Can I just ask that you include local authorities' youth services in that? Because Personally, I'm not aware of what MI does within Torvine, but I'm aware of what youth service does.
Certainly, we'll include the youth services, and we work very proactively with the youth service in all 5 local authority areas, and obviously with your Principal Youth Officer, Dave Williams. Certainly, I'm probably underselling the value in the youth services, but I'm fortunate to sit on the National Interim Youth Work Board, which is particularly recognising the support that youth work and youth services, both statutory and voluntary, do provide within our communities. And from my perspective, a fundamental tool. We've talked about, stop and search being a tool within the police, but youth services, youth work is an important, absolute important commitment to our young people in terms of preventing their involvement in crime, antisocial behaviour, and supporting them to have real positive outcomes. So I really do appreciate the question, and perhaps we can have a follow-up conversation. But certainly the Commissioner both works very closely with the youth services in all areas, including Torvine. And in Torvine, we're also really pleased to fund the Cwmbran Children and Young People Centre. So really wanting to work with everybody around how can we offer the best support, and where it isn't appropriate for it to be perhaps policing support, how can we work with our local youth services to provide that service.
Thank you. It's the reason why people go missing is the key, isn't it?
Okay, I think that we've finished on that one, unless I don't see any other indications. Our next item is the review of the classification plan. I don't know if you want to speak to this one. Oh, sorry,
I'll say it again unmuted. Next item is the review of the draft police and crime plan.
Apologies, Chair, and apologies to those who are following the interventions online. I think I forgot to unmute my microphone at the last question, so apologies to those who might not have heard the conversation, in particular around the value of youth services and the importance of understanding the reasons why children go missing, but also the support that statutory and local authority and voluntary youth services can provide to policing services and to young people in our communities. So I present to you on behalf of the Police and Crime Commissioner the draft Police and Crime Plan for your consideration this morning. The Police and Crime Plan is a requirement of the Police and Crime Commissioner as they commence their term of office to set out in detail their vision and their objectives for delivery of police and crime services over their term of office. It is here in draft. It's in draft because we welcome your engagement, we welcome your support, advice. We recognise the role you play as pivotal community representatives of your constituencies, but also of representatives of your full councils in being able to help us shape and understand the priorities that affect our communities, but also the priorities for the Chief Constable and for our services. In terms of, I'll just speak for a few minutes in terms of providing you with the sort of rationale and the context of how we've developed the plan, and then would open ourselves up for any questions, but also really to offer you the opportunity to come back to us outside of this meeting with any comments and any suggestions before we look to finalise the plan and then present it formally by the Commissioner to yourselves and publish the document. In terms of drawing together the plan, following the Commissioner's election in May, the plan for the development work started really gaining momentum. The basis of the plan comes from the Commissioner's manifesto at the election, and therefore is built on an absolute basis of social justice, of a view around one public service and delivering an effective policing service for our communities that, you know, clearly at the heart of it is making sure that people who work, live or visit Gwent are safe, are protected, and that we provide them with the most effective services. In doing so, we have to take account of certainly the work that Gwent Police undertake in developing the force management statements. Those are in-depth analysis that the force undertakes for Her Majesty's Inspectorate that gives a real analysis of the challenges, the capacity, the demand in our communities in relation to police and crime services. We have to take into account the strategic intelligence assessment, which is around making sure that the capabilities that any police force needs to be able to have as part of its suite of services are understood, and that we have that balance in terms of community neighbourhood policing, in terms of cyber, in terms of serious and organised crime, in terms of a whole range of capabilities, that we are assured that we understand what the priorities are. That we really reflect on survey results, on HMIC inspections, and also the legal framework here in Wales through the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, the work that all of our public service boards do on their wellbeing assessments, looking at the programme of government, and also the draft policing vision for Wales. So we have consulted significantly with the Chief Constable and with her chief officers and senior leaders, but also with the Federation of the Police Federation in Gwent, with Unison in relation to police staff, but also our staff networks. So our staff networks that represent gender, disability, Black and minority ethnic workforce. So really trying to build an opportunity for the policing service to influence and provide their professional judgment around the priorities. But most importantly, in order to develop the plan, we've had an extensive engagement exercise with the public, with key stakeholders that has been delivered since May and has resulted in this plan. We have undertaken a survey that was published and publicised through the PCC's channels, through partners. And, you know, thanks to local authority, county councils, and through the Council for Voluntary Services, both GAVO and TVA, who've really partnered with us to try and build as an extensive reach as we possibly can to gain the views of the public in relation to this plan. We've held over 30 engagement events, which has resulted in 196 hours of engagement. 1,829 people have been able to give us their views directly, and 375 people completed the survey during this period. And that number of respondents really, the 1,800, sorry, I've got sorry, I've misread my figures. So 1,829 people voiced their views on the survey, 1,461 were digital, with 375 being undertaken manually through a written questionnaire. So sorry, the 375 is not the total number of people responding, but the 1,829 is the total number. And that 1,829 is in direct contrast to the 759 respondents we had in 2016. And that consultation really gave us a significant amount of assurance, with 77% of respondents either strongly agreeing or agreeing to the proposed priorities, with only 6% disagreeing with the priorities that we are suggesting in the plan. And it gave us the opportunity to talk to members of our communities, with our cyber crime team, with our We Don't Buy crime team, and with our school liaison officers. So it really builds our opportunities. So at the heart of the plan is about making Gwent a safer place to live, work and visit. We know Gwent is one of the safest places in the United Kingdom, but we want to make it a safer place. At the heart of what we are trying to achieve is to tackle offending, to support victims, and to increase community confidence in particular. But I know that we've had some real brilliant exchanges at this panel over the years, and I think I can give you our assurance that the key messages you gave us at the last panel around catching the criminals, enforcing the law, that is what policing is about, as much as supporting communities and supporting victims. So we have tried to reflect the full aspect of law enforcement, tackling offending, tackling the root causes of crime, as well as supporting victims, and prevention is absolutely at the heart of what is before you today. There are some key principles that run right the way through everything in the plan, and firstly that is equality and ensuring that we understand and provide an inclusive, equal service, and that we combat discrimination and hate. That sustainability is at the heart, and I know you in particular, Chair, are always keen to encourage and support us to think about our environmental concerns, the sustainability of our service, but the sustainability of our resources in particular. Absolutely at the heart of it is a one public service approach and partnership, and the absolute commitment to working in partnership with our public service partners, but also our communities, and the understanding that cyber will impact our services and the need in relation to the delivery of our objectives over this period. So the priorities that are in the plan that are there for comment are around keeping our neighbourhoods safe, which is predominantly about tackling crime and tackling ASB, combating serious crime, which is very much about preventing and reducing crime and reducing the harm that crime causes in our communities, to support victims and protect, in particular, vulnerable victims and vulnerable members of our community, to increase community confidence in policing. And I think we've had that as a theme all the way through today's meeting. We want to be able to deliver increased confidence in our communities of being safe and feeling safe, and finally driving a sustainable policing service, which is sustainability in both our environmental, in meeting our climate change challenges, but also a sustainability in terms of funding and resources, and providing the Chief Constable with the resources that she needs in order to deploy our services, her services. So I will leave it there. It is very much a draft for your contribution and comment. As I say, we welcome your advice and support. It is important, and it is part of the Section 7 of the Police Reform Act that we must present this draft to yourselves for your consideration before the Commissioner seeks to then finalise the report, finalise the plan and publish it, which will then enable the Chief Constable to build her delivery plan against the Police and Crime Plan.
Thanks again, Eleni. I don't think we're going to have a long discussion on it today somehow, but I did notice that you had the word sustainable in on the first page of the document, so maybe the message is going on, but unfortunately the word is misused sometimes with certain people, isn't it? But and again, we're all invited to feed in. I think probably if we feed into Kath, you can coordinate. Rather than just sending individual comments, we can send a panel comment in via Kath. But if there aren't anything anybody wants to say for the moment, but we will have the chance to get these things in writing as well. Anyone wish to make a comment now?